Dumelang Murubuanji, Mambo Mangwana, ni Riferile Bonjour. What's the other one? Bon dia. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the conversation on gender-based violence. Today, we are involving young men in the SADC region. Now, recently, we have seen a very, very disturbing pandemic that's been happening in the region, whereby young women, young kids, they are killed by their partners. And that has led to a movement starting, we have movements such as Men Are Trash, we have movements such as Me Too. And today, we want to know how young men see gender-based violence and how young men want to become part and parcel of the solution, because we are sick and tired as women being statistics, but also it's not only a heterosexual issue. It also involves the LGBTI community. We have young men that are still abused, young gay men, young queer men that are still abused by their partners, that are still abused at home. It can be emotionally, it can be physically, it can be through resources. So today I'm joined by four wonderful young men from the region. Rukuto Kalari from, I hope I said your surname correctly, because I know that I get very offended when somebody says my surname, mispronounces it. But then we have Rukuto Kalari from Zimbabwe, who will be talking about these issues that we are facing, but then on a perspective from a young man. And I want to know from your side, Rukuto, what role can young men play to end the gender-based violence? Because I know particularly in Zimbabwe, there are cases whereby a young woman can go to the police station to report her husband or to report their partner that they're being abused, and the police would sometimes chase them and say, go back to your partner, they have married you or they're in love with you, they're just showing you their affection. So from your perspective as a young man, what role can you play to make sure that you end gender-based violence and you don't just tick boxes, but end the statistics and make sure that young women are protected?
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Kelly? Okay, I think it starts from simple things like, calling each other out when we are involved in these things, because I believe that conversations that nature's gender-based violence are incubated in male conversations. So I think it's time to normalize positive masculinity talk in our day-to-day men conversations. And the other one, from the works that we do as YMCA, we realize that gender-based violence is mainly a product of bottled feelings, bottled thoughts and stuff. And what we have realized is we had to create a platform in which young people or in which men can express their thoughts and feelings, or in which they can be not really vulnerable, but in which where they can be open. So as to detoxicate the masculinity traits that come, the toxic masculinity traits that comes with our masculinity. So, from these points, I'm sure you can tell that we have something to offer as men. So we have to be on the gender-based violence table. We should have a seat because we have something to offer, not because we are men, but because of each other than when they are with women. So yeah, and I think as men, we actually have a role to play, from that angle. We can't expect to win a battle when half of the team is.
Excuse me a bit, guys. Please, for those who are not speaking, please mute your mics.
Time for both sides. Okay, can I continue?
Yes, you may. You may continue.
Hello. So the thing is, we both have a role to play, and I think my argument over the course of my time in my works in gender issues has been the gender discourse has been inherently feminine, and it's time to put the masculine voice on the whole discourse, because it's only fair to expect a win when the whole team is playing together rather than having half of the team benched or in the terraces, as has been the case of men in the conversation around gender-based violence.
Mhm. Okay, I hear you, and you were talking about putting a muscular voice in the conversations. But last week when we were having a conversation, picked up a trend that, you know, we have men that
Yeah.
are gatekeepers, men who usually are the ones who are the perpetrators in behind closed doors. But in the public eye, they would literally say, I am a man who's against gender-based violence. You know, I don't do this, I don't do that. But when you go back home and ask their partner, how is the treatment? How's your relationship with your partner? You'd find that it's either they abuse them financially or emotionally. You know, such words, calling somebody that body shaming. Those are the things that women go through in their homes, all in the eye of or behind the person who would say that I am against gender-based violence. I am this young person who is my sister's keeper. So I want to know from Uganda, and I know that Uganda is a very Christian country. They are very traditional also at the same time. They believe that a man is the head of the house. They believe that, you know, a man's word is the last word, and there is no way that you can overrule them. So Hamza, I want to hear, especially, I know that you've been part and parcel of movements such as She Decides, whereby, you know, you speak for the body anatomy of a woman, you speak against gender-based violence, you speak against men guarding women's reproductive health. So from your perspective, what role can you, I know that you've been playing a particular role, and Rukuto spoke about calling each other out. Would you have that gut? Usually we call it liver from the bushari, you know. Would you have that gut to call out a man and say, you know what, you have done this? We have so many friends that would come to you and say, Bra, you know, last night I got this girl drunk and I had my fun with her. Would you call them out? And what role can you play as a young man, particularly in Uganda, whereby it's a cultural country, to end gender-based violence, especially young women who are molested, young women who are, you know, abused every day, all in the name of culture. Also, there are young men who are abused also in the name of culture. So how can you, as a young man, with your peers, calling them out and having other solutions and gender-based
Yeah,
violence?
thank you, Lerato. For me, what I can say is most importantly is we need to deassociate ourselves as men from collusion on issues to do with upholding gender-based violence. It is so common that whenever we are in our own spaces as men, we actually do want to associate with other men who collide and promote or continue perpetuating women's rights. And for me, if at all we can come together and say, you know, I am not going to be part of the conversation, and then open up a conversation that is actually to do with empowering and ensuring that women do not face this kind of violence in their communities or in their spaces. And it begins within those small conversations we have as men. So much of the time, whenever we are seated as men, you find that we are talking about how we have the power to deassociate ourselves from how women feel and how they are mistreated. But then when we go back into the community or where women are, you realize that we show that we are trying to support them into fighting against gender-based violence. So if at all any system has been designed, and we know that patriarchal systems have been designed in a way that they are going to oppress women, if at all men in Uganda, or we can start with ourselves associating from conversations or collusions to do with perpetuating the rights of women, then I feel we shall have taken a step forward, especially in those simple conversations we have, because all this begins with changing mindset. Religions, we subscribe to religions that have showed that have actually taken over our mindsets, how we believe in things. And if we can associate with some of these things that show that with power as men, we can rule over other people who may not subscribe to the beliefs that the religion or the cultures are saying, then we shall be in position to realize that there won't be gender-based violence against women. Because most importantly is to put ourselves in a position of vulnerability and understand what it would mean if a
Oh, I think we network
man
decided not to
also
love us.
was abused in that way. So I feel like in Uganda can begin with if we are.
Okay, thank you. Your network was acting up, was tweaking a bit. It was tweaking, sorry, it was tweaking a bit. But then I hear what you're saying, that you need to dissociate yourself from conversations. If, let's say, for instance, your friend tells you the way they have had another woman, the way they're portraying themselves as a muscular man, and it becomes problematic when it goes home, because sometimes we also sit at home whereby our brothers, we can see that they're literally abusing somebody, either their partner, but we don't say anything. And it's because by the mere fact that they're saying a man mustn't show any emotions, a man mustn't talk about how they feel and conduct themselves in a certain manner. I know, I'm not sure if you were present, but there was an instance whereby last year in Kenya, where I did a piece about deconstruction of the pennies. And there was somebody who came and told me that I offended them by telling how, you know, um, it causes how patriarchy, it was merely talking about patriarchy, how patriarchy is becoming a societal norm, and how it's harming then the gender roles, how it becomes a loud hailer for violence, how it becomes a loud hailer also for hetero men to become homophobic. And with this statement, I want to cross over to Peter and hear how, we can end, and which role he can play to end gender-based violence, especially from a perspective of a young queer man. I know that there are a lot of issues, that the LGBTI community or the SOGIES community face when it comes to gender-based violence. It's homophobia, it's hate crime. There are a lot of things that, young men face, and there are a lot of things that young women face from the SOGIES community. And I want to hear from your side, which role you can play as a young man to end gender-based violence, not only just becoming your sister's keeper, but also becoming a keeper of your fellow young queer men.
Thank you so much, Lerato. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
All right. So more than anything, I believe so much so in bringing everyone to the table, bringing everyone forth. This is a conversation that must be had by everyone, men, women, queer people, people of color, white people. Everyone should be brought to the table, because it affects everybody, whether you're straight, whether you're gay, whether you're lesbian or whatever. This is a problem that everyone is facing. And when we get to speak from a perspective of understanding what everyone is going through, then that's where we can come with solutions that work for everyone. For instance, gender-based violence is something that is happening in the queer community. And I find that a lot of people aren't really aware, because, well, a lot of people aren't really aware of a lot of things that queer people go through, because of so many things. For instance, queer people don't get to speak out about the challenges that they face as queer men or queer people, because they are marginalized. And when one is marginalized, it's so much easy to be victimized, because a lot of the perpetrators get the feeling that they can commit a lot of injustices with impunity, because no one is going to call them out for being sexual predators, especially to people in the queer community. No one is going to call them out for hitting a queer person because, well, they're queer. We still have a long way to go, especially in our African countries, where the idea of homosexuality is still being, I don't know, people are still trying to get used to it. So before people get used to the fact that gender-based violence is happening in the queer community, people still need to understand what or who queer people are and the challenges that they go through. So bringing everyone to the table and talking about the challenges that everyone is facing would be the best place to start. Swaying away from the queer perspective, I'd like to speak about something that I've noticed, especially in the South African community, especially in the male community. When the hashtag Men Are Trash came up, what I personally found was that a lot of men, instead of listening to the women's cries, you know, listening to what the women are going through, men were rather quick to defend themselves. You know, I don't know if you noticed, but immediately after the hashtag men are trash, there was a hashtag that came back to the timelines as a form of response by men saying that, well, not all men are trash. Well, not all men are the same. Well, you know, that just went about to prove that instead of listening, men are quick to defend themselves. Instead of listening to the challenges that people are facing, the challenges that women are crying about, men are just quick to say, well, no, it's not everyone. And that was in a way dismissive of what people are going through, you know, because when people want to speak out, when people are fed up, you should just listen so that you get a better understanding of what it is that people are going through, and maybe respond from a place that is informative, I guess. Yeah, that's just me.
No, I hear you, and I was just putting it down here that, you know, we need to listen and we need to empathize, if I'm hearing you correctly, because we as men, I almost said we as men, however, as men, there is a tendency of protecting themselves or not trying to be part and parcel of the whole thing, because now they think they're superior, or I don't know, but it's something along those lines. And we have picked it up that there was a retaliation, if I can use that word for a lack of better word, that, you know, not all men are trash, not all men are abusers, but we forget that abuse comes in many forms, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. We forget that gender-based violence, it comes as, you know, rape or sexual assault, it comes as physical assault, it comes as forced marriage, it comes as denial of resources or services, it comes also as a psychological or emotional abuse. And sometimes you might say that, no, I'm not physical, but forgetting that you might be emotional. Sometimes you might say that, no, I've never committed some sort of gender-based violence, forgetting that you forced your partner to marry you, or you are part of the statistics of men that ended up marrying a young child, all in the name of culture. But that's another conversation for another day. Right now, I want to speak to Trevor, knowing that Botswana is actually a country behind South Africa when it comes to gender-based violence. We know that 1 in 3 women get some sort of gender-based violence, some sort of sexual assault in their entire life before they turn 21. We know that every 30 seconds, there is a young woman who is sexually violated. I mean, we have started this call at 10 o'clock and now it's 19 minutes past 10. So you ask yourself, how many young women have been sexually violated? And now the cases are not reported. We are under lockdown. Some of the cases are not reported. Some of the cases are treated as a family matter, you know. So there are a lot of things that happen. And we know that in Botswana, Trevor, it's a very, very, very Christian country. And, you know, when you speak about something, they will tell you that go and speak to the pastor. You know, they will tell you that resolve this issue as a couple, because in the eye of the God, you are one. So I want to hear from your side, being a young man who is into, you know, social media, who is having his own talk shows in terms of dealing with these issues. What role can young men play to end gender-based violence, especially that you have a mouthpiece, you know, you speak in the radio, people do listen to you. So what role can you play as a young man to end gender-based violence?
Thank you, Lerato. And, you know, I heard you talking about the statistics, and just to highlight one of the things that happened in Botswana during the 2 months lockdown that we had due to coronavirus or COVID-19, we had close to 47 cases being reported during that time. And usually during lockdown, we think that people are at home and they are actually safe, but you would find that people are actually suffering even at the places that they call homes. And there was actually 2 cases of young girls under the age of 8 years who were actually sexually violated. And it raises a concern to show what, it raises a concern because, you know, it shows what kind of a country or society we're growing to. So I think what we need to actually do as young men within our communities, we need to be held accountable for what's happening. You know, usually when we talk about GBV, we think of talking to men who actually perpetrate the kind of abuse that we're talking about, but we're also referring to that man who's silent, who's not doing anything to actually solve the problem of gender-based violence. Usually you would find in instances where probably you're traveling by transport, public transport, you would hear conversation about men talking trash about women and talking about how they're controlling they are, and talking about how they are the heads of the house and they need to put things in order. And it raises a concern because, you know, we need to talk about gender-based violence holistically, and we need to understand as a society that, you know, we cannot put a face of gender-based violence. Usually when we talk about gender-based violence, people think that, you know, there's a certain kind of a look of a person who's violated, there's a kind of a person who deserves to be violated, especially when we talk about women or people who prefers to wear certain kind of clothes, and you'd find men use that kind of justification that the person was not wearing proper clothes, the person they let them on. So I think we need to change our mentality of how we talk about gender-based violence. It goes all the way to a younger generation like children, how we talk in our family. We need to teach our young children, especially boys, that it's okay for them to cry. You know, it's okay for them to find a shoulder to cry on, so that they grow up knowing that it's okay, you know, to fight off the toxic masculinity issue. So I think we need to change the conversation all the way from a young age. And I think it will be very important, since most of people, they attend in schools or some sort of institution, that we need to put a lot of information about gender-based violence in the moral subjects that we have within our syllabuses and subjects that we have in school, so that children grow up knowing that gender-based violence, it's not a good thing, and we should be against it, and we shouldn't justify we shouldn't find any reason to justify ourselves with it. So with the radio show that we actually have, we have topics that we usually talk about, and most of the time we emphasize that, you know, when it comes to issues such as sex, they should be concerned. You know, there shouldn't be any other fishy reasons that people actually engage in sexual activity. They should be concerned. And I believe with any other forms of relationships that we talk of, you know, we usually emphasize that people should date people that they like, you know, to fight one way of actually encouraging people to be in these healthy relationship. Because in Botswana, most of the statistics which are given out, like Lerato was saying, most of the perpetration or the abuse that we face, they are within relationships. You know? So I think changing the conversation and changing the conversation about gender-based violence from a young age could really help us.
Yeah. You know, you spoke a mouthful. I think some of the words out my mouth when we're speaking about consent. You know, we forget that we have men who prey on young women and young men. You know, they would go to schools with their flashy cars and take the young girl or the young boy and then do what they want to do with them, forgetting that it's statutory rape. You know, there are a lot of elements of this gender-based violence that we need to readdress and to redefine as young people, especially as young men, because Hamza also spoke about how, you know, we would talk, or we will talk trash about women. We would leave people talking the way they want to talk about women. You know, they'll tell them, oh, she's wearing skirt, then they would call it abuse. That is abuse. That's some abuse on its own. But before I close, I would like to just ask you guys one more question, and I want you to think deeply about it. I want you to, internalize it, digest it, and respond to it, because it's a very tricky situation, especially when you're thinking from a cultural perspective, or from a point whereby you need to redefine yourself as a young man, and you need to let go of all the toxic norms that you have been taught. And it's that, how can you as a young man redefine the norms and become your sister's keeper? We don't have a lot of time. We would have taken questions from the floor. However, due to time, we can't. We will take just one question. So if there is anybody who has a question, please kindly share it while the panelist is still thinking about the question that I've asked for them. So while you're still asking a question, I want to share just a short, a piece with you that I have written. And this is how I'm catching the points of the young men. So to all the black boys who know how to shed tears, boldly holding their hearts above their heads, waiting for the tomorrow with brittling eyes, the world needs you more than ever. For the size 10 men with ballet sleepers, and fathers who have become mothers with fragile hearts and their hands holding flowers over war, the world needs you more than ever. For my little brother trying to find the sky, waving his ashy hands, fighting for the cringing, and for survival, trying to look soft. Sons that have become their mothers, fleeing from crumbling masculinity. Redefine yourself. You are more than your chest. Gather yourself after the hurricane, because the world needs you more than ever. Just peel back the layers so that we can meet the mess beneath you. For some, a terrifying, beautiful mess of smiles and emotions. Break the fading dream of smiles and emotions. Rebuild the water inside of you. Dance with rainbows and suns, because the world needs you more than ever. Sing the songs that are made of thorns inside the dark clouds. Let the pain go, for you are harmony broken and shed. Find a way to neutralize the threat. Find a way to not let the monster feed on you, as the world needs you more than ever. So to all the to the participants, if there is any questions, please share. You can share it with us so that the panelists can respond to it. But I'm gonna start with Hamza in terms of my question that I've asked on how we can redefine the roles and the norms and become my sister's keeper. So with all that has been said, Hamza, with all, making sure that we're calling each other out, making sure that we dissociate ourselves with men who are speaking ill of women or other young people, making sure that we speak about emotions, how can you become your sister's keeper and redefine the norms?
Yes, Lerato, for me, my understanding of this is we need to start creating our own systems. Like Peter was saying, if you can listen to your partner, then you are in position to create your own individual system in your own small space. And that alone can leave a legacy whenever people come in the space that you're in. Because if you try to ensure that some of these things that the cultures are teaching us, that you do not uphold up to them, and you create your own system of defining on how you want to relate with women, either in your own home or even outside in society, then you can create a system that people will look at and also follow. Because most of the times we are still saying gender-based violence, toxic masculinity, subscribing to certain beliefs in religion, in cultures. All this is because we are not trying to redefine the system and say, I can create my own system that respects everyone's belief, everyone's understanding, whether woman, whether LGBT. So if you can create your own system, I believe then we can become our own sisters keepers, because it will not matter who you're with, whether it is your actual sister or it is another stranger, but so long as it is a human being, you can gender-based violence.
No, I thank you. So we need to redefine the system. But now there is an issue. Who redefines those systems? Are you just redefining them as men, or you redefining them with women being part and parcel of the conversation? Because now we have an issue whereby we need to include everybody. You know, this is not an issue of just women. This is not just an issue of men destroying their patriarchal ways or their toxic masculinity, you know. So it's a very broad issue. It's an issue whereby if I am on the menu, then I need to be on the table. And I'm going to allow Peter to respond on the question on how we can redefine the norm and become my partner's keeper. I think the issue is also the wording, that we just focus this on only just being a heterosexual issue only, you know, just it being a female issue where women are just abused. But we also have young men, we also have men who are abused by their partners. So how can I become my partner's or my sister's keeper and also redefine the norms?
Thank you, Lerato. More than anything, I believe that these systems that we live in, these cultures, these traditions, have created some sort of box where people are supposed to, you know, subscribe to. We have all these labels that we are supposed to uphold and keep and represent and make sure that we do that well. And more than anything, I think these strip away the humanity of people, you know, to an extent where people forget that before they are anything else, they are human first. And if we can get to a point where we understand that before we are whatever that we are, before we are men, before we are women, before we are queer, we are human beings first, and start treating each other as such, that is the way that we can become each other's keepers. That is the way that I can become my partner's keeper. That is the way that I can become my sister's keeper.